There comes a moment, quiet, unspectacular, when the world stops feeling like home. You still move through it. You still play along. You still laugh when expected. But somewhere inside, a door has closed, and you can't remember when. You start noticing what others ignore, the repetition, the surface talk, the way everything feels slightly hollow. You sense that everyone is performing a version of themselves that no longer fits. You're not better than them, just awake. And awakening always comes with exile. If you've ever felt out of place in a world that rewards noise over nuance, subscribe to Literary Exile, where solitude becomes strength and awareness becomes clarity. Because exile isn't punishment. It's the moment when belonging loses its meaning, and truth begins to take its place. You start to realize that being cut off from the familiar is not loss. It's the beginning of becoming real. The first stage of exile is raw absence. Not poetic, not noble, just empty space where life used to echo. People drift away. Your old rhythms dissolve. Even your thoughts begin to sound foreign to you. But in that silence, something ancient begins to stir. At first, it's just discomfort, the nervous twitch of a self with nothing to hide behind. Then slowly, it becomes recognition. You start to see who you are when there's no audience. It's frightening and necessary, because exile strips you of everything that was borrowed. Kierkegaard said, "To dare is to lose one's footing for a moment." And that's exactly what exile demands. The courage to walk without ground, to speak without echo, to exist without witness. That's how the inner world begins to take shape. Exile teaches a new kind of discipline, not of control, but of stillness. At first, the silence feels unbearable. Then you begin to notice its structure. It has weight, texture, rhythm. It becomes a teacher that says nothing, yet reveals everything. You learn to listen, really listen. Not to others, but to the undercurrent of your own thoughts. You discover that attention itself is a form of strength. While the world runs on noise, the exile learns to conserve energy, to observe before acting, to speak only when words can carry truth. This discipline is not about retreating from life. It's about preparing to re-enter it, without losing yourself again. If this path feels familiar, subscribe to Literary Exile. Because here, solitude isn't escape, it's education. Distance is the first reward of exile. It doesn't come all at once, it unfolds quietly. Like dawn, you begin to see your old world with new eyes. The ambitions that once drove you now look mechanical. The praise you sought feels weightless. The people who once defined you seem to be chasing ghosts of their own. You feel compassion, not contempt, because you know you are one of them. Exile softens arrogance. It shows you how fragile conviction can be, how easy it is to mistake repetition for meaning. From a distance, you understand that almost everyone is trying to escape something, and that your exile was simply a more honest version of that same desire. After distance comes reconstruction. You've torn down the false walls. Now you must decide what to build. At first, you try to rebuild the same house, but the materials no longer fit. You can't return to the person you were before awareness. So you start smaller. A morning ritual, a piece of writing, a walk that belongs only to you. Structure returns, not from obligation, but from integrity. This is when exile begins to transform into purpose. You learn that freedom without form collapses. You build rhythm into your days, And in that rhythm, you rediscover dignity. The exile who endures long enough learns to live without applause, and that is the first sign of sovereignty. Over time, the mind of the exile becomes a kind of republic, self-governed, orderly, quiet. You no longer seek external approval to justify your thoughts. You weigh them internally, like a philosopher testing the strength of a bridge before crossing. You become deliberate. You move slower, but every step is your own. What once felt like loneliness now feels like competence, the ability to exist without constant validation. From this inner republic, you can finally engage the world again, not as a servant of its chaos, but as a sovereign participant. You begin to speak less from reaction and more from comprehension. That's the quiet confidence exile builds, not showmanship, but authority born of endurance. Eventually, exile brings you back into the world. But you're not returning. You're arriving. You no longer look for belonging in others. You bring belonging with you. You no longer chase purpose. You act with it. The world hasn't changed, but your perception has. You see its restlessness, its confusion, its hunger for meaning. And instead of resenting it, you understand it, because you've lived its opposite. You walk among people again, but with the calm of someone who has already survived disappearance. You speak, but your words carry silence behind them. This is the quiet triumph of exile, to re-enter life without being devoured by it. At last, the exile becomes ordinary again. But it's a different kind of ordinary. It's simplicity after complexity, peace after turbulence. You no longer need to prove or proclaim anything. You've learned that truth doesn't demand recognition. It simply endures. And in that endurance lies serenity, not the shallow peace of comfort, but the deep calm of understanding how things are. If you've walked any part of this path, subscribe to Literary Exile. Here we speak to those who see too clearly to fit neatly anywhere. Here, exile is not defeat. It's the origin of self-mastery. Because once you've been alone with the truth, you can never be exiled again.